Goku vs Saitama is quite literally the biggest power scaling debate in anime history, but here's where it ends. I'll give you an answer that, by the time we finish, is going to feel inevitable. To start things off, we're going to go over some of the greatest feats to, get everyone up to speed in terms of what Goku and Saitama are capable of. First up is Saitama, and his entire thing is about casually doing the most impossible things ever. Even back before he fully lost all his hair, he was able to outrun his own reflection in the mirror. That is just insane. I mean, even before going bald, Saitama was moving faster than light. When it comes to his attack potency, we know that when he performed Serious Punch Squared alongside Awakened Garou, it generated an explosion that caused countless stars and galaxies to instantly disappear. Just like that. The portion of space was completely erased, and all that was left was a massive void. Next, his accidental sneeze carried enough force to blow away Jupiter's surface right down to its rocky core. And for speed, he blitzed Awakened Garou so fast that he created a constellation around Jupiter's moon before Garou could even react. To add on to that, he was moving so fast, he appeared to be in multiple places at the same time from Garou's perspective. He left behind countless afterimages that were actually still there and landed punches from every possible direction at the same time, all with just one hand. Then there's also Saitama's durability feat of simply tanking a gamma ray burst, which is said to be the single most powerful explosion in the universe. Next, let's look at Goku. As a Super Saiyan God, he fought with a suppressed Beerus, and their clash both shook and was about to break the universe itself. Now, I know that Dragon Ball can be very hyperbolic. I mean, you had Nappa from the Saiyan Saga claiming he's boundless, and Frieza claiming he could destroy the universe. But in this specific case, we could take Beerus being capable of destroying the universe as a fact, because it just makes sense that the god of destruction of the universe is able to destroy the universe. Be that as it may, even with the universe itself at stake, Goku was ultimately able to analyze and copy Beerus' fighting style. I mean, this is what allowed him to match Beerus' attacks and cancel out the shockwaves that later threatened the universe. Later, while up against Hit's time skip, he was able to predict the movements he'd make in the 0.1 seconds of skip time and react properly. That's how he countered a technique that for over 1,000 years was completely unstoppable. He achieved this even as Hit was constantly improving said technique in battle. More importantly, Goku has mastered Ultra Instinct, a technique that none of the gods of destruction, including Beerus, have been able to master, despite being hundreds of millions of years older with experience as a god of destruction. But Goku performed such a feat in less than 48 minutes and is the only mortal in all of the 12 universes to have mastered the technique. The Ultra Instinct, of course, lets Goku move and fight automatically without conscious thought or delays, which effectively allows him to fight with perfect efficiency. Now, when you put Saitama's feats of destroying stars and galaxies next to Goku's feat of stopping Beerus from destroying the universe by countering Beerus' attacks and nullifying the shockwaves, Goku's feat is obviously better. This is why the power scalers who understand Saitama's ability to scale himself end up with the conclusion that Goku wins if he goes all out from the start, but loses if he lets the fight drag on. And I'd even say that this is logical. For example, Super Saiyan God Goku has better feats than anything Saitama has shown so far. So if Goku locks in, he can finish the fight immediately. But this argument is incomplete because it operates on the assumption that what we've seen from Saitama so far is all Saitama is capable of. That is obviously not the case, because unlike Goku, who gets pushed to his limits all the time, Saitama has never been pushed ever since he removed his limiter. Not even Garou, who was able to perfectly match Saitama's own strength after mastering the flow of all things in the universe, was able to actually hurt Saitama. So think of it this way. If Goku from the Namek Saga had participated in the Tournament of Power instead of the Goku who could already use Super Saiyan Blue times Kaioken 20 and more, then Goku would have been fodder. However, if Saitama from episode 1 had fought Garou instead of the Saitama from the Monster Association arc, he would have still been able to perform at a similar level to how he actually did. This is because even if there's any potential gap between these two versions of Saitama, the Saitama factor will make it irrelevant in a matter of seconds. And fun fact, Murata once joked in an interview that because there's no way to measure Saitama's strength, we can't exclude the possibility that Vaccine Man from episode 1 is the strongest monster of this series. Anyway, any conclusion that ends with the assumption that Saitama's greatest feat right now is all he is currently capable of is wrong, because it is placing an arbitrary limit on Saitama. But hold on, what if we assume that Goku hits Saitama with his strongest attack at point 0 of the fight? Now, Goku is not not a good example to demonstrate this point, so let me use Hit instead. We know Hit can time skip, right? So what if he one-shot Saitama at point 0? As in, time starts after Saitama has already been one-shotted. And who's to say Goku, with his Ultra Instinct, can't replicate a similar feat? Honestly, this is a good argument, but it completely ignores Saitama's absolute untouchable durability. There is zero evidence in One Punch Man that Saitama can be physically harmed, let alone one-shotted. This means this claim is based on nothing but a random power scaler's assumption that Dragon Ball's hacks abilities automatically work. That is unreasonable, especially because we know for a fact that Saitama operates beyond hacks. For example, he was able to grab hyperspace and punch his way back through time. And back during Child Emperor vs Phoenix Man, Saitama punched a hole into a spiritual space. And there's also Saitama's Dimensional Slash feat. Before the ninja arc got redrawn, Saitama was able to catch Void's Dimension Slash, which came from beyond the causality of the universe. Basically, it was theoretically impossible for anyone to avoid the clash, and yet Saitama casually grabbed it. Now, of course, technically it's not canon anymore, but I still want you to consider this as a showcase of Saitama's abilities. I mean, why do One Punch Man manga chapters get redrawn? Is it because Murata wants to nerf Saitama? Of course not. It's because it wants to redo parts of the story and its context, which is why the feat itself still stands as independent proof. It remains valid for understanding his abilities. Plus, it was built on what we already know about how Saitama can interact with and nullify spatial dimensional attacks with zero effort. So if your friend tells you that the redraw means Saitama can no longer do that, the logical burden is on your friend to prove it. They must explain how changes made exclusively to the lore of Empty Void somehow retroactively stripped Saitama of the ability to stop a slash that came from outside the causality of the universe. The feat happened, it demonstrated a 5D level capability, and unless there's direct evidence that Saitama himself was weakened by the redraws, which is something that One Punch Man, as a narrative, will never do, that demonstration of him stopping the dimensional slash remains a valid, powerful piece of evidence in any versus debate. Having said that, let's go back to the Hit example. If Saitama's capable of punching back in time, and notice how I said capable, that's because he doesn't have those memories anymore, but he can do it. And if he can also stop attacks that come from outside the causality of the universe, then how the hell can he not stop a simple time skip assassination attempt? For some reason, Saitama haters are always fully willing to ignore well-established concepts that Saitama scales vertically, that Saitama is invulnerable, and that Saitama is not capped by any tier. At best, they'll say that whatever, Saitama is a gag character. And alright, let's also go over that. If the narrative bends over for Saitama, does that mean he's a gag character? No. A true gag character, like Arale from Dr. Slump, operates by warping the very rules of their reality for comedic effect. Basically, the logic of the world bends to the joke. Arale could somehow beat Vegeta's ass, and it's funny, because logic was never a factor to begin with. Saitama's different. Let me explain. In One Punch Man, the laws of reality are consistent for all characters. When Genos fights, he calculates energy output, sustains damage, and has clear limits. When Garou fights, he employs real martial arts principles and pushes his body to continuously break his limits. Now, Saitama can bend logic, but not for a punchline. His powers operate exactly the same way in serious situations as they do in non-serious situations. This means he's a satirical device whose function is consistent, not a gag character whose power changes based on the joke. Plus, his power has also an in-universe explanation. As Dr. Genius explains, Saitama removed his limiter. Now, we all know that Saitama's strength comes from a mechanism fundamentally outside standard power scaling. We're talking about the undeniable fact that Saitama has no concept of a limit in any sense of the term. Again, this is not the same as surpassing one's limits. We've seen characters like Garou surpass their limits and overextend their limiters, but the thing about Saitama is that he was able to conceptually remove it from his very being. So, does that mean he has infinite growth? And if so, how is it different from the infinite growth of Saiyans? Well, infinite growth is a good term, but not correct. What we have here is absolute power. By removing his limiters, Saitama gained the ability to register and surpass any required power level to achieve victory. This is quite literally the fundamental law of his existence, and it is defined by the absence of a maximum. He is strength itself, and his power automatically scales, not progressively, not instantly, to match or exceed whatever threat he faces. Now, I can already hear some of you ready to bring up the no limits fallacy. So, let's also talk about that. The no limits fallacy is the error of assuming that because something has demonstrated a limit, it has no limits at all. But this fallacy is for characters characters whose powers are vaguely defined. Saitama's power, on the other hand, is explicitly and narratively defined by the absence of a limit. It's not that we haven't seen his limit, the core premise of his character is that it was conceptually removed. So if someone brings it up, you can tell them that claiming Saitama has a limit we haven't seen is like claiming a character explicitly written to be immortal can die because we haven't seen them live forever. It is simply a dumb argument. Of course, in case any of you haven't read the One Punch Man manga, this may not be easy to understand, so let me bring up a very relevant example from Dragon Ball. Let's compare Saitama's scaling to a Dragon Ball character that serves as an almost perfect analog for unbound, instinctual, exponential growth in the Dragon Ball universe. We're talking about Broly. He showed the capability to scale from being overwhelmed by base Vegeta to fighting Super Saiyan Blue Goku in a matter of minutes. This is a near flawless example of vertical, instantaneous scaling within Dragon Ball. However, while it's similar, it's not the same as Saitama. Broly still operates with a high but existent conceptual limiter. This was proven when Gogeta Blue, a sufficient force of overwhelming power, was able to defeat Broly before Broly's growth could outpace the fusion's threshold. So yes, while Broly has shown vertical growth far beyond what we've even seen from characters like Gohan and Frieza, it's not the same as Saitama's ability to automatically scale himself. And I'm going to say this in the kindest way possible, Saitama is the conceptual superior to Broly. Unlike Broly, he cannot be overwhelmed before his growth kicks in, because his scaling is just like that. Just like how Saiyans have the ability to grow stronger when they face a near-death experience, Saitama has the ability to surpass the scale of whichever threat he faces. Yep, you can even think of this as the ultimate version of the Saiyan Zenkai boost, which can be defined as a biological process that triggers in response to damage and stress. In Saitama's case, he gets hit, he gets mad or excited, and his power skyrockets. Of course, Broly did the same, but his growth wasn't as instantaneous. Plus, at one point, it became obvious that he won't be able to catch up to Gogeta Blue. Saitama operates on a completely different principle. His growth is preemptive and absolute. The graph from his fight with Garou is mathematical proof. Garou's power after copying Saitama's own is shown as a steep exponential curve. But even compared to that, Saitama's is a basically perfect vertical line. Saitama's power basically snaps to the required coordinates on the graph where he becomes infinitely beyond his opponent. There is no window to exploit because the adaptation occurs in real time. Now the counter argument is, but he needs to feel strong emotions for that to happen. And you're right, the graph was triggered by his anger over Genos' death. But let's apply that to a fight with Goku. What is Saitama's deepest, most consistent character trait? His boredom and his desire for a challenging fight. So if Goku in Super Saiyan Blue or even Ultra Instinct lands a blow that actually makes Saitama feel it, if he unleashes a Kamehameha that actually forces Saitama to put effort into a serious punch, do you honestly think Saitama would maintain a poker face? No, he would be thrilled, and that thrill is all he needs to immediately scale to the required level. Finally, let's address some common counter arguments. One major argument is Goku's multiversal, Saitama is planetary. Honestly, as stupid as this sounds, it gets brought up so many times that we have to talk about it. Now, the idea that Saitama is strictly planetary is based only on observation of his usual output, and that too, only from people who have only seen the anime. First, it's simply not true. Second, even when it was true, it was only true because Saitama never needed more than planetary strength to beat his opponent. Remember, Saitama's feats are merely a measure of what was necessary to defeat his opponent, never his absolute limit. To be fair, I don't understand why this even gets brought up. I mean, look at this serious sneeze that blew away the surface of Jupiter. Sure, you can call it a planetary feat, but Jupiter's like 1300 Earths. Plus, this was merely collateral damage caused by Saitama merely sneezing. Think about that. A casual sneeze produced planetary devastation. Not to mention, there's the consequence of Saitama's clash with Cosmic Garou. The shockwaves generated by the serious punch squared were enough to erase constellations and galaxies from hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of light years away. And that was before Saitama's growth peaked again. Let me say it again. The Saitama that blew away the surface of Jupiter with a sneeze is actually stronger than the Saitama whose clash with Garou erased multiple galaxies. This means that the true attack potency of the current Saitama is completely undefined. Now for other common counter-argument, Goku's Ultra Instinct speed and hacks abilities would one-shot Saitama. Yes, Goku's mastery of Ultra Instinct grants him unparalleled speed, which allows him to dodge and counter threats that transcend time and space. But ultimately, this is the exact same as the idea that Goku would one-shot Saitama before his growth kicks in. And as I've said before, it fails to account for Saitama's most fundamental and absolute trait, absolute, untouchable durability. Saitama's invulnerability is not something that scales with his strength output. Instead, it's a conceptual constant. non-existent. Simply put, there's zero evidence that any force or attack, regardless of scale, has actually ever hurt him. I mean, we've seen Super Saiyan Blue Goku hurt by a base laser gun, and we've seen a fire hydrant tanking Goku, but we've never seen any serious anti-feat from Saitama. The closest thing you'll find is him getting scratched by a cat, but that's like Goku being afraid of needles. It's a moment played for comedy, unlike Goku's many actual anti-feats. Basically, Saitama being invulnerable is as much of a fundamental fact as Goku being a Saiyan. He can lift black holes, he can bathe in a volcano, he can adapt to the vacuum of space, and when it comes to hacks, so far in this story, all he's shown is that he is completely unilaterally immune to any and all kinds of hacks. Alright. Having established that Saitama possesses a superior conceptual scaling mechanism and absolute conceptual durability, it's time to address the final argument, the metaphysical conflict. When verses clash, what dictates the outcome? In a conceptual crossover, the rules of their respective universes must collide. The defining rule for Goku's scaling in Dragon Ball is that there's always a bigger fish. In other words, power is conditional, relative, and endlessly scalable through effort. However, the defining rule for Saitama scaling in One Punch Man is that Saitama's power is absolute. The rule of absolute strength is conceptually simpler and more foundational than the rule of limitless growth with conditions. So when two premises conflict, the absolute premise overwrites the conditional one. Finally, let's see how it'll play out. Let me show you Goku vs Saitama in its raw, naked glory. The fight would begin with Goku testing the waters, perhaps in Super Saiyan or even Super Saiyan Blue. But the instant Goku delivers a punch that registers as a real threat, the first sincere challenge Saitama has had since forever, the Saitama factor mechanism would activate. This immediately triggers the instantaneous scaling factor. The Garou fight showed us that Saitama's power does not follow a ramp. It immediately matches and then instantly exceeds whatever necessary level is required. Just as Broly surpassed multiple Super Saiyan levels in minutes, Saitama would surpass Super Saiyan Blue Goku and then even Ultra Instinct Goku in seconds. Goku would escalate forms, but the gap, instead of closing, would vertically adjust and maintain Saitama's instantaneous advantage. Ultimately, Goku's power is defined by potential. He is a Saiyan born on Earth who never stops training. He could theoretically reach any level, but he must train for it, maintain it, and transform to access it. Saitama's power is defined as an absolute. At any given moment in time, Saitama already has what he needs to win against any opponent. All he needs is to bring it out. So there you have it. When you break down the very concepts that define them, the fight between Goku and Saitama leads to one inevitable answer: Saitama wins. No matter how high Goku's potential soars, Saitama's reality is defined as being higher. The moment a genuine challenge is registered, his power readjusts to a level of absolute superiority. To fully drive this point home, let's say the clearly invincible multiversal entity Monster God personally shows up to fight Saitama in the next chapter. And keep in mind that just a touch of the Monster God's power was enough for Garou to become basically as strong as Saitama. What do you think? Will Saitama lose? Nah, he'd win. Especially because we already know that Saitama has the ability to knock God's power out of its minions. For example, when Saitama struck Garou and Empty Void, they were freed from this entity's influence and reverted back to being human. This is why even Blast made a comment that there's something special about Saitama's fist that allows him to do this. Alright, having solved what is quite literally the greatest debate in anime power scaling, let's take that same energy and take it even further beyond. Because if you enjoyed this, you absolutely need to see me break down Luffy vs Saitama.